Welcome to Local Voices, a community podcast produced by the Echo newspaper, which takes a deep dive into the news that matters the most to you. I'm your host, Hayden Moore. Before we get into the show, please don't forget to subscribe to the Echo newspaper on YouTube or follow Local Voices on your streaming platform of choice. So, this week we're holding a virtual roundtable discussion with 3 local elected representatives about 3 core topical issues: the living wage, hot school meals, and Cycle South Dublin. Now, let's meet our guests. Green Party Councillor Laura Donaghy, delighted to have you on the show.
Pleasure to be here.
Fine Gael Councillor David McManus, welcome back.
Hayden, thanks for having me back on again.
It's a pleasure. And Sinn Féin Councillor Dermot Richardson, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me on.
Great. I'm delighted to have the 3 of you here. I really am. And as per usual, we have a ton of stuff to get through on this episode. And we're going to start with this. So there's been a lot of discussion lately, particularly around the pandemic unemployment payment and the living wage, I suppose, because of that. The Department of Social Protection has been contacted by 35 employers over the last few weeks with concerns about staff who have been in receipt of the pandemic unemployment payment being a little bit more reluctant to return to work. I'll start off with yourself first, Councillor McManus. Can you understand why there would be a reluctance, especially when you factor in issues such as maybe childcare, changes in employment, the minimum wage, etc.?
I'd be surprised if people are reluctant to get back to work, because as far as I can see, everyone is gunning to get back out there and reopen the economy and get back to normal. I can understand that something needs to be taken into account, the level of welfare you're providing, if it's a disincentive for people to go to work. And I think we can all agree that wherever possible, work should always pay more than welfare. So back in 2011, when Fine Gael came into government, the minimum wage was €7.65. It was cut by Fianna Fáil. Now it's been up to €10.20. And now the Taoiseach Leo Varadkar has made a commitment that we should be looking towards a living wage. So for me, looking at it, I think work should always pay more than welfare. It should always be better for people to get up early in the morning, go out to work, whether they're working shifts or anything, whether they're working part-time, wherever possible. Obviously, there are people who may have a disability or, their personal circumstances have to be taken into account. But I think the big priority now for government is going to be try and get the economy back open as soon as we can, and try and get all the businesses back open, try and get back to some sort of normality. So I was surprised when I heard these comments from some business people that they were finding it hard to get staff back to work. As far as I can see, everyone is keen to try and get back to normality as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think you have a quite unique perspective on this, maybe, Dermot. Obviously being an employer, I suppose, in a sense. And I know, just based on what Councillor McManus was saying there, the Department of Social Protection has received, I think it was 2,000 or 3,000 notifications over the past 14 months from basically talking about the reluctance of employees returning. What do you make of those statistics, and what's your perspective on it?
Well, I've been contacted by a lot of people that have been cut off the PUP payment, and for no reason. They're still out of work, and the business is closed. And I think the uncertainty is really that's given what people are saying out there, the economy opening back up, and then business is not known whether they're going to sustain going forward into the future, because they don't know how long are we going to be in another lockdown come September, say, after the summer months of people not being allowed to do anything. Then to the whole, everyone's out trying to get to a beach, or if the weather's good, or up the mountains or somewhere. So there's uncertainty out there, especially from as well of employers. I mean, employers are very uncertain about the future as well around, and I'm just saying local areas, say we're all different parts of the county, but I'm hearing it broader. I spoke to Peterborough in the chamber this morning. There is uncertainty out there for employers and that, but it's the wage, living wage, where one sense I agree with David where he's saying that they should be encouraged to go to work and pay more. But if someone's in social welfare and they have a family and they go and they're getting their 10-20 an hour, well, sometimes they might lose a medical card, which is very beneficial for people and families and stuff like that. And I'm not going to turn into a big row with David, but sometimes we need to look at it from a different side and saying, if people are losing their medical card and they're saying, I'm going to get nearly the same from going to work, they're not going to do it. Simple, And it's caught in that like poverty trap of getting out of it. And that's what we have to look at, I think. You know what I mean? But there is a lot of uncertainty out there because of this. Nobody have ever thought this pandemic would happen. And we're nearly 16 months into it, sort of thing, Yeah. But it's hopefully we're coming at the right end of it. So,
yeah.
And I think the government, going forward, I mean, so with the uncertainty, and they did help people with rates and stuff like that, but there's a lot of business out there that stayed open as well through the pandemic as well, and we'll have to compliment those people in business, that the shops and all these type of stuff that were stayed open, and the staff that kept them open as well, you know. So we have to look at them. They're prime locations as well now, but all the shops are open now. I think the pubs are people are waiting for, and that's where we have a scarce thing.
Councillor Donaghy, to bring yourself in, and there's been some good points brought up there, and it's definitely a factor, the minimum wage and the slight disparity there between what has been calculated as a living wage of $12.30 an hour. And I know that's something the government are working towards, hopefully. How can you expect people, I suppose, to keep up with the high cost of living without a living wage? And I know that's something that the government have said they're hoping to do during their life cycle, but like that's how long is that going to be?
Yeah, I think the government is looking at how they can move from where the minimum wage is at the moment to turning it into a living wage. I know $12.30 was the most recent recommendation. I think Living Wage Ireland is due to report again in June, and it'll be interesting to see how that changes, especially with sort of changes to working patterns, changes to shopping patterns. You know, everyone's behaviour has changed very, very dramatically over the last year and a half, and I think there are two issues tangled up in this. I mean, to start with, there is a big question about the mismatch between the cost of living and where we put the floor on what people's incomes can be. I mean, if it costs more to have a dignified life than we're paying in the minimum wage, then there's a problem there. And you have to tackle that by looking at things like the cost of accommodation, like looking at the cost of insurance for people who are, say, running cars. You know, there are a lot of issues around general cost of living that need to be tackled separately. And we also need to make sure that people are able to afford a basic standard of living. But separately from that, there's this specific set of circumstances we've got as we're coming out of the pandemic. I mean, as Greens, we talk an awful lot about the just transition from where we are at the moment to a low carbon economy. But I think we kind of need to be talking about a just transition to what the post-COVID economy is going to look like. I mean, a lot of people have found that they're now able to work from home, and an awful lot of people aren't able to work from home. But for those who are, you know, that has an impact on, for instance, businesses serving city centre offices. So the people who were working in cafes in the city centre, what are their employment prospects going to look like? What does that look like for workers? What does it look like for business owners? And, you know, we're not really going to see where all the pieces fall from that until later. You know, I know cafes are doing great business in residential areas where usually they're kind of commuter towns or dormitory towns, but we're really looking into a new world. And I think how PUP is tapered down, when it's tapered down, if it's based on particular sectors, if it's a flat rate, you know, we can't just go back to the way things were, where there were so many people who were struggling, who were at risk of poverty. And I just hope that we're going to take an approach that is fair for everybody.
Yeah. Just to go back to yourself again, Councillor McManus, I think it's very interesting, the whole because I've spoken to a few people the past couple of weeks, and like they're getting the 350 on the pandemic unemployment payments, I think is what it was, and they're going back to work this week to work in retail, and they're getting €100. Like, it's so hard to like I've seen like people being kind of demonized in a sense online for that, but like, can you really though, when you consider it, can you actually blame them?
I wouldn't be harsh. People have their own personal circumstances. As Dermot said earlier, people have families, have to look after. They're only doing what's right for themselves, and you don't want to put them into a poverty trap, I think, as Dermot was saying. But as we discuss the issue of, say, the living wage, going from the minimum wage to living wage, anyone who's an entrepreneur, someone who started their own business, you know, usually they go into it, put their own money into a business. For the first couple of years, they're working 60, 70 hours a week. There's no guarantee that entrepreneurs are themselves getting living wage, or in some cases the minimum wage. For the first number of years, it's all hard work and blood, sweat and toil. So I don't know how government could possibly mandate that people who are self-employed will be able to pay themselves. There's no guarantee of business coming in the door. So I suppose the whole nature of work has changed between when you had very simple, these are your employers and these are the employees, these are the workers. Now you have more jobs that are somewhere in between, where people could be self-employed themselves at home, working from home on the laptop, and then working part-time somewhere else, trying to bring in extra revenue. But no, look, I wouldn't be harsh on people. And I think, look, $350 a week, government is trying to signal, I think, to people that at some point all these supports have to come to an end. I think Dermot mentioned the commercial rates waiver earlier on. South Dublin County Council, I think, has got 60 million from government to try and pay the commercial rates for businesses that are closed. That's an emergency measure. It's necessary, but that can't go on forever. So in our case, in South Dublin County Council, we're all councillors. We have to try and cut our cloth, and the books have to balance, the bills have to be paid, and you'll have very different views as to how money should be spent or where it could be spent better. But that's democracy.
I want to ask the three of you this question. I'll just start with yourself, David, just while I'm talking to you. I know the Low Pay Commission has been asked by the government to look at the design of a living wage for workers in Ireland. How soon would you like to see the living wage introduced in Ireland?
I'd say to try and give certainty, put a 5-year period on it, rather than saying we're going to go from one rate overnight to something different. Perhaps 5 years may be a bit too long, but I think no more than 5 years as the economy recovers. Because I think Dermot mentioned earlier, there's a lot of businesses out there who don't have the certainty of how the economy will be for the next couple of years. So you're trying to signal early on as to how we can progress in that direction.
Councillor Richardson, just to ask yourself, how soon would you like to see the living wage introduced in Ireland?
Of course, I mean, love to see it being introduced this year, but I don't see it for that. But I mean, I don't see 5 years as it's too long, really. You know what I mean? Like that. So I mean, maybe in the early stages of next year, even that we could see some sort of increase. It doesn't have to get to the full stage, but even some increase. I do feel we're going to go into a recession after the economy sort of opens back up again because of the uncertainty, and there will be a lot of businesses closing. So I mean, there is that end of it out there where employers are afraid to bring their staff back as well because of this uncertainty as well. Because I mean, there is that thing of cash flow for a small business and all that type of stuff around the whole county and countrywide as well. But I'm talking about the council relies on the rates coming in to sustain everything going forward. 52% of the money coming in goes out as well. And so we are very dependent as a county on rates, and they are very important. But I do think the council will have to work on an individual basis for businesses going forward to see that they are sustainable going forward and that type of stuff. And there is, I mean, businesses contacted me and they have threats of eviction, which is wrong. I mean, they've gone into agreement with landlords and stuff like that. And it's totally wrong for the landlords to start trying to evict people who have been in premises over 10 years and stuff like that. So I do see a lot of court process down forward and that type of stuff, which is not going to help business in an uncertain economy.
How do you see preventing something like that? Because I know obviously it's a bit of a trap. Like if you're a landlord, you're expecting to get.
Even if there's mediation going forward, it means, you know what I mean, quick mediation going forward, and there is that available out there as well. You know what I mean? I suppose local enterprise office should be able to help in that situation and provide something like that in a business where if a landlord is of course the landlord needs his money as well for paying stuff, but banks have to step in here and say, look, we see, because the recession will hit, we're going to be hit really bad. You know,
yeah,
and then the poorer people become poorer, the richer become richer, as we all know. You know what I mean? That, but I do feel it's across the board for everyone here. You know what I mean? This is uncertain times for everybody.
Yeah, Councillor Donaghy, just to ask yourself then, how soon would you like to see the living wage introduced in Ireland, or a living wage of some factor?
Risk of giving a real politician's answer, I think it depends on a lot, but I think the main thing it depends on is how quickly or how slowly PUP and other wage supports from the COVID era get tapered down. I would like to see us going directly from those supports to a living wage, but without knowing sort of how fast or how slow that's going to be. You know, I don't want to say in the next 3 years if actually it's possible in the next 2 years. I'd say by the end of next year I'd like to see that in place. I don't know if that's going to be possible. I know that the government is looking at it, but I think that would be the fairest and most equitable way of doing it, and make sure that people don't get caught in the middle, I guess.
Just to ask you, just for people who mightn't be sure, that's something that would have to be considered in a budgetary context, would it, every year, where you'd have to increase minimum wage? Is that how you'd have to do it?
I would have thought so, but I'm not totally clear on the legislative basis for it.
Okay, cool. Okay. All right. Okay. I don't know if anybody else has any more points that they want to bring up on the living wage. If not, I'll move on. Okay. Yeah. So I think there's a very interesting conversation to be had around that. And the reason I wanted to bring it up was just because of the whole conversation between maybe a disparity between, I know, because a lot of people are coming back to work this week as well, and disparity between the PUP and the living wage. Yeah. Okay. So we're moving on. So there's a hot school meals pilot scheme that's been run by the Department of Social Protection. Geez, this is turned into a Department of Social Protection podcast. Yeah, and its goal was to essentially provide regular nutritious meals to children who, due to poor food quality, may be unable to take full advantage of the education provided to them. Its main goal was to provide it to DESH schools in particular. I think over 90% of the schools that were awarded are DESH schools. Which basically means that if you're a DESH school, it basically means that you're a school that has been recognised for needing additional supports to tackle educational disadvantages. 189 schools of the 281 who expressed an interest were selected after, and 4 schools in Killinarden and Tallaght in particular registered expressions of interest, but only 3 have been awarded the hot meals. Knockmore Junior School didn't receive the school meals, even though they're on the same premises as Knockwear Senior School. So literally they have like this thing where there's siblings, older siblings on the senior side getting the meals, and then there's their little brothers and sisters on the junior side not getting the meals. And that was entirely based off a lottery system. It was said in the Dáil, just in all fairness now this week, that Minister Humphreys was looking to find a solution into this. Councillor Richardson, just to ask yourself first, because I know this is obviously your area, and I understand that this needs to be considered in a budgetary context, but it's believed that it would cost only €370 per child to access this scheme. Like, do you think that it should be like just rolled out across the board?
Look, of course it should be rolled across. It shouldn't be a lottery scheme for starters. If one school in the area is getting it, they all should get it. I mean, if it's 189 that went for it, as you're saying, your figures there, but I mean, this one got it. So you have a brother going into the senior school and a sister going into the junior school. One gets a hot meal, the other one doesn't, which is unfair really as well, and especially for the area that's in as well, Desh area, Desh schools, you know what I mean? So I was in touch with the principal this morning and she said that it's not sorted. She's waiting on people to get back to them. And it's not a point scoring thing of trying to criticise the government as well, but I'm just saying this should be a broader thing and saying we should be all agreeing on this, that it shouldn't have happened, first of all, and fix it. And not fix it in September when the kids are back in school. Fix it now. It's only it's only a tick of a box for Minister Humphreys to do this. And that's what should be done. Because there's children out there who are suffering, not getting a lunch, hot lunch in school. And it does make a difference to the parents as well when they're getting something to eat. And you know what kids are like? They eat all day. They'll eat all day, once it's there. But I do think it's wrong. The system is wrong. It should be changed. That it should be, the schools are going for it. There shouldn't be ones that's penalised on a lottery scale. I think it's totally wrong.
You said there that you were speaking to the principal this morning, and it has been resolved. But were you talking to her about what kind of problems it creates by them not receiving the meals?
Well, the first thing the parents are saying out there is it's discriminatory. Really, that's what they're saying. They shouldn't be getting one school getting it and one not getting it. As I said to you, this should be a broader thing of everyone agreeing on this and working with their own party and going forward and saying this should be sorted next week. We've only a couple of weeks to the school finishing in June for summer holidays, and then in September. I don't see it's going to be sorted by the end of June. I think it would be still in September going forward. And I mean, I know every party has been contacted about this and they're all doing their little bit to get it resolved. But we've the two people on there that are in government, the parties are in government. They should be saying there to their, I know they're saying Colin Brophy has given an understanding and all that he was at. We've all the, Sean Crow's been on to the minister as well, the minister's office, and they're waiting on coming back to them. It's really a stroke of a pen here in civil servants and the minister to get this sorted, and the meals could be done. For the amount of pupils that's in the school, it's not a big deal, to get it sorted.
Yeah, and I think that's it's a fair criticism as well, because there's 91 schools that were left off who expressed an interest and basically didn't get it. Councillor McManus, why is it right that children in a DESH school have to rely on a lottery system?
It's not good enough, and it's not really adequate. It doesn't look good on the political system. It doesn't look good on the Department of Social Protection to have one school side by side. Both of them are eligible. Both of them should qualify, and one gets an answer of yes and one gets an answer of no, as Dermot outlined there. And you have one child in a family getting a hot meal, another one isn't. So I'm hoping it can be resolved. The Hot Schools Meals programme was introduced by Fine Gael on a pilot basis in 2019. And initially on a pilot basis, it was to support about 6,500 pupils around the country. It's now been expanded sixfold and it's supporting 35,000. I suppose when a scheme is introduced on a pilot basis and money is allocated to it, there and then I think the minister or politicians need to try and say, right, do we introduce it for 100 schools this year and another 100 next year and roll it out? Or do we not do that and say, right, if we're going to do it, everyone gets it, all the DEIS schools, anyone who applies, everyone gets it. So it doesn't reflect well on the political system. So I've contacted Minister Humphrey's office. They said they'd get back to me with an update. Hopefully it's sorted sooner than later. But for Knockmore and Knockmore, a senior school, it doesn't look good for them. So I can only apologise for what's happened. But you've got two schools who are technically separate side by side. One of them got it, one of them didn't. In this case, the demand for the scheme outstripped the availability. So the department was left with a situation where they said, right, we'll make sure that there's definitely one school in every local authority area will get it. And from then on, it's a lottery system, which is not ideal and inadequate. Hopefully it can be resolved.
I know you said there that it was introduced a couple of years ago, the budget 2019, I think it was, wasn't it? Or 2018, 2019, yeah. And it's increased sixfold. But do you not think that maybe after the first bout of the pilot initiative where there were 6.5 children trialed with getting these hot school meals, that was a good enough litmus test to go straight afterwards, all right, let's just roll this out across the board?
Yes, absolutely. And money has to be found. And when you're in government, this is the things you have to consider. Look, we're all councillors here. We all know every area of South Dublin County Council is under pressure for more spending, more expenditure. No one wants to pay any more in property tax. No one wants to pay more in any commercial rates. At a government level, there's a piece in the paper today suggesting that the government should be increasing income tax across the board. We should be increasing property tax. These are decisions we have to try and make, and it's not exclusive to Ireland. This is every country in the world has to try and make these decisions to give the greatest benefit. But just in response to what I think Dermot was saying, for me personally, I would say hot meals for the schools should be there for all DEIS schools and all disadvantaged schools that need it. I don't think it would be proper to say we're going to give this to every school in the country, because I think when money is scarce, my view is you give it to those who most need it. And as a similar issue, child benefit goes to families all over the country. We're giving child benefit to families on high wages, people on 100,000 euros a year. It's like a subsidy for them to have sex.
That's a clip for you, David. Christ. Right, okay. Councillor Donaghy, to ask yourself, messaging from the Dáil would suggest that it is going to be resolved, but as we know, it's not. Like, the school hasn't received any proper confirmation that this issue is going to be resolved. But why should schools, I suppose, in that disadvantaged area, why is it that they have to kind of fight tooth and nail for every scrap of support?
I don't think there's a clear and direct answer for that. I think a lot of the problems around this particular scheme and this particular decision, I think this is what happens when you have everything centralized in the Department of Education, and these kind of common sense decisions can't take place at a more local level. I mean, a lot of other countries, it would be local authorities that make decisions around policy stuff to do with schools, and they would see two applications come in from the junior school and the national school, or the boys' school and the girls' school, and know that they're serving the same community, and that if you allow one to receive something if you allocate to one and you don't allocate to the other by lottery, then, even in a scheme that's supposed to be about leveling the playing field for all kids, you're creating a two-tier system within that community. I think that's been lost. I think it's kind of surprising that there isn't a system to check things like this within the Department of Education. And I think this is partly what happens when you decide this is the pot of money that's available. Like we know from other countries that this kind of scheme works. It's been green policy for at least the last 7 years, that every child should have access to a school meal, and that should be free of charge if it's children in DEIS schools or people in areas with significant social disadvantage. I think there has to be some point where you say, actually, this works, and we're going to allocate to it whatever it costs. This is our next generation. This is ensuring kids get access to a good education, as well as proper nutrition and all of the health benefits that follow from that. This should be a no-brainer, I think. And I think it's disappointing that it's being rolled out slowly, but I'm glad it is being rolled out, and my party is certainly supportive of it happening. Just I think the whole application system and the speed of the rollout probably needs to be looked at. I know that my colleague in the Dáil, Francis Duffy TD, he brought this up back in April, and has been in touch with the minister, has been in touch with the junior minister, Joe O'Brien, and my understanding as well is that really they're looking to get this sorted by September. And I would hope that that'll be a solution, not just for Knockmore, which obviously needs to be sorted out because there's an anomaly there within a community, but really every Dash school that looks for it, I don't see any reason why they shouldn't get it. You know, when I look at where we spend money elsewhere within the system, and I'm thinking, for example, of things like HAP, I find it very difficult to say we're going to subsidize, you know, the private rental market, but we're not going to feed children who are in disadvantaged areas and whose school is saying we would like hot school meals. You know, I think all of politics is about choices, and sometimes, you know, I'm a member of a small party, and that party is in government, and we don't control absolutely every decision. But I think sometimes there are decisions that are taken that really don't add up to the kind of society that we all want to live in, and that I think we all do want to live in. I think everybody on this call would say that we would like to see Knockmore getting hot school meals. It's just a question of what do you not pay for to meet that gap.
I know you mentioned there yourself and Councillor McManus that they're looking to get it resolved by September. I know that the Dáil is, I don't know if the Dáil is going on recess this year, is it? Does anybody know?
I'm not sure, but the departments would still be running, and their ministers would still be in action regardless of whether the Dáil's in session. Even then,
would September even be soon enough? Because like obviously they're still in school now up until the end of June. These kids are.
Oh.
So I don't know. It's a big question. I know. I know. Go ahead, McManus.
Sorry, I think last year the minister made sure that even with the disruption with COVID and schools closing, the meals program was still in place, so it's still being rolled out during the Easter break, during the summer months, I think over Christmas. So that's to try and ensure a bit of flexibility in the system.
Yeah. I think there's a very interesting points there, and like I think, I don't know, like from the messaging that I received from Colin Brophy TD during the week as well, he basically told me that it is going to be resolved essentially, and that was the indication.
Yeah.
But like I don't know. Like he said, within 2 weeks, hopefully. But like I don't know if that's.
Well, can I just say, this is not a point scoring thing as well. I think we should be all working together, and it's not me criticising Fine Gael or the Greens, but you are the ones that are holding the purse strings here as well, along with Fianna Fáil. And it's not a lot of money to get this sorted. I know it's not your area, David or Laura, in Cycle South, but I do think it needs to be resolved fairly quickly. As I said, we'll say 4 weeks left in the schools. These kids they're saying, and the families are saying now, discrimination. You know what I mean? That the lottery, it shouldn't be done, and learn from the mistakes that's been made here, and make sure it doesn't happen next year in if allocations going forward. That's all I'd say. I don't try to point score with people. I try and work with people and resolve things, and I think that's the way to doing this. And people shouldn't be taking credit of saying, Colin Brophy, all due respect to him, he shouldn't be coming in saying I'm going to sort it. It won't be sorted in September. I'm saying that now because I know. But it can be sorted if the councillors in front of me here give a commitment to push it. And I know it's not your area, but if it was in your area, you would be pushing it more. And that's all I say. I know our TD, Sean Crowe, has asked the minister to intervene immediately, and they're waiting on an answer back. But I mean, these are the ones there in power, David and Laura, and Francis, and not I get on well with everybody.
Look, it's a very fair point made, Dermot. It's a very, very, very fair point. And look, even though I'm a councillor for Rathfarnham and Temple Oak, I think we can all agree you don't want to see two schools side by side, kids from the same family, and the kids are coming home asking the parents, why is he getting a hot meal and I'm not? There's no answer for that. There's no rationale. I know. I accept that. Yeah.
And without getting into the scale of the poverty in different areas and stuff like that, there is kids go there is kids go hungry in the schools and stuff like that, and we have to be conscious of that type of stuff as well. I know the schools don't let it happen because they will intervene. So one person's getting a little bottle of water and a piece of fruit, and the older brother's getting a hot meal. It doesn't add up. And I'm not created, as I said, I'm not here to criticise. It's not point scoring. I try to work with every party going out there because that's the only way you get things done. And get a video up, David. You're good at doing the videos there. You know what I mean? Get a video up. You want to see the desk.
No. I wouldn't be. I try. You know me, Dermot. I try and stick to the housing.
I'm talking about. And your group leader there, Brian. Get on to him and he can push them. And And I think Francis Duffy is a good key in the area to get things as well, and with Sean Crowe as well, and all the TDs for the area, to get it sorted. You know what I mean? It shouldn't have happened. And let's not keep it going with criticism. Work together and resolve it.
Councillor Donaghy, would that be something that you would consider doing? Would you consider pushing it with your colleagues who are in government?
Yeah, of course. But I mean, we have our local representative for the area, Vanessa Mulhall, and I mean, I spoke to her before I came on the podcast. She works really closely with Francis Duffy. I can't think of a single councillor on South Dublin County Council who wouldn't be behind this. It's not a partisan issue. Like, nobody wants kids in DEIS schools to be going hungry. Nobody wants there to be a two-tier system. I don't think there's any barriers to that. I don't think there's any reason. I don't think there's any reason why this shouldn't happen. It's just a question of the gears of the state moving in such a way that it does happen. If we all write a letter, if we all put a video out, I think the end result is going to be the same. But if we can make it happen that bit faster, yeah, I'm absolutely open to doing that. I mean, I don't see that would be something that's controversial or, like I said, partisan.
Okay, Grant.
I might get a bit of training off David for the video.
Okay, I think we'll move on, but I want to actually just go back to something that you said, Councillor McManus. Now, I'm thinking about it. You said about the child benefit being a reason for people to have sex. Like, that's entirely unfair. You can't just go around saying things like that. That's not right, and it's not.
To be fair, and I welcome the views of our other contributors. I'm just making a point, right? That no matter who's in government, Sinn Féin could be in government tomorrow, and if they said, right, lads, money is scarce, we have to use it for the most benefit for those who need it, they'd have my full support. So we give support to those where it's needed. And for some people looking at me, who might think that I'd be trying to support people on high income getting universal payments, I wouldn't. If someone's on 100 grand a year, it's quite a good salary. If a TD, and TDs are on 100,000 euros a year and more, I wouldn't be suggesting, it's one example I'm giving of, you could make savings in that area to put it into DEIS schools for those who really need it. That's something that I'd be for. Getting people who need help and raising the bar for everyone, but not giving universal payments to everyone. And this is the sort of thing that you have on, Joe Duffy Liveline, people ringing in going ballistic. How dare you say this? How dare you say that? I think our politicians need to be a bit more direct and upfront. And I welcome the views of our other two contributors on this, but I don't believe we should be giving universal benefits to those who are on good salaries. That's just my view.
No, of course,
those who need it.
I understand what you're saying, but do you really believe that it's an incentive for people to basically have sex and have children just to get money? Like that, there's no real fact in that. That's just total opinion. Like, you can't really just go around saying things like that, like with no basis.
Well, look, Hayden, I say to people, look, if you agree with me, you can vote for me. If you don't agree with me, don't vote for me. It's very straightforward, this system of democracy. And to be fair to our other two colleagues who are elected, that's the system we have. And sometimes I think politicians, we're always trying to say everything to everyone to please everyone, and we never have to make any tough decisions. We have to say, right, guys, this is what I think should happen. Money is scarce. Let's use it in the best way possible. We mentioned schools earlier on. We mentioned the hot meals program. We also have to build a lot more schools because there's new families, there's new estates being built. If an estate is being built, they have to carry out a census, make sure there's a school in the area for the kids when they grow up to reach 3 or 4 or 5, that there's schools in place in the area. There's prefabs we need to get rid of in lots of schools. So there's huge demand for extra resources. So it's about how we try and spend the money properly. That's just one example I'm giving to you today, and our other two contributors, I'm sure, can give their view.
So sorry, you'd be all for essentially people earning money over a certain threshold having their child benefit payments cut in order to repurpose that money into a certain into other aspects of society, like hospital meals.
If it gets more money for the DEIS schools in Kilnarden that we just spoke about in Tala, absolutely, yeah, that's what needs to be looked at.
I know Councillor McManus is obviously welcoming the thoughts of yourselves, Dermot and Laura. I don't know if you want to respond to anything.
Well, I just think maybe the comments, David, giving child benefit is money to have sex. I mean, you might want to review your comments before this goes out, because I do think it'd be very controversial. And as I say, if you like it, you vote for it. It's the same with everyone. But I do think the comments might be a bit. You're going to have the media all over this thing from saying, I'm telling you this much. But look, everyone has a view on it. I mean, child benefits, if we're going to create a two-tier system of if you're earning X amount of money and there's people depending on child benefit for the reasons of feeding the kids and all that type of stuff. You know what I mean? So it's different strokes for different folks, I would say. But I don't agree with what you're saying in their comments there.
Donaghy, do you want to go?
Yeah, I think if Councillor McManus thinks that child benefit covers the cost of rearing a child, I think you might want to re-examine your budgets there, because I don't think there's too many families that are coming out with a net positive after receiving child benefit, and that's making the difference to them. I also think it's a very easy win as a talking point, but I think when you actually look at the reality of universal benefits as opposed to means testing, very often what you spend just administering the means testing ends up costing it as much as if not more than if you just given the benefit to absolutely everyone. If we were talking about means testing, so the child benefit could be higher for those on a lower income, that would be fair enough. But I think it's a subtly different question to say whether is universality a good thing or a bad thing, or should supports be targeted. And that's been at the root of so many of the kinds of poverty traps that Councillor Richardson was talking about earlier in the podcast. I mean, there are so many, there's always, wherever you draw a line, there's going to be somebody who's on the wrong side of it and doesn't deserve to be. And I think sometimes you have to accept that someone is going to end up with €140 extra in their pocket at the end of the month, who maybe doesn't need it, but it means that so many other people who did need it are in the system, and they're receiving a benefit that they should be entitled to, and that a more targeted system might leave them out of. So I wouldn't be in favor of something as black and white as that. I agree that we need to go back and we need to look at how we are distributing benefits. I think my party's position is that we should have a universal basic income, and I imagine Councillor McManus would be very opposed to that. But it's coming more and more into the discourse in, well, basically everywhere post-pandemic, and as we move into a more automated age and everything else. And while it makes intuitive sense that you should just give more money to people who need more support, in practice, when you actually try and get that to people, it doesn't always work as cleanly as you'd expect, and it can have unintended consequences. So,
can I just finish up just by saying on that one point, I am making the comments in a particular way, just people on high incomes, whether it's 100,000 or 150,000, I'm just raising it as an example. I understand how important child benefit is for a lot of families out there. Raising kids, childcare, it's all very, very expensive. I accept all that. I'm just making the brief comment, just about people on high incomes as an example. Do you have universal benefits for everyone, so everyone gets the same regardless of your income? Or do you say money is scarce, those on 150,000 or 120,000 a year, single person with kids shouldn't be getting it? That's my example. But again, it's a fair point, and there's different. And you could say, look, if they've more than 3 kids, that has to be taken into account. People have large families, small families. So,
Councillor, I've heard this line of argument from members of your party, and I'm sure lots of other people who are not members of any party or members of other parties, that that high earners shouldn't receive this type of benefit. And I mean, you've had an opportunity to reform the welfare system. It has been cut to the bone in the past 10 years, and then slowly built back up to a certain extent. But, people have ended up in terrible hardship. Why was child benefit not kind of first on the chopping block if you feel that people were getting... I'm not asking you to answer for decisions that have been made by other people, but I'm asking, why do you think this hasn't been tried before if it seems like such a no-brainer?
I would accept, Laura, what you're saying. It's not a no-brainer, and it's not a no-brainer. And I think you made a good point about having a very, very complex means testing system for all payments. It can lead to a very, very convoluted system, and sometimes the money involved in means testing every application can be more than what you'd save. So that's a fair point that you made, which I accept.
Okay, I think we'll leave that there. Right, I'm conscious of the time now, so we'll move on to the next point. Sorry, I just wanted to circle back around to that just because I couldn't not challenge on that, David. I just had to come back to on that. Okay. Right, so next one. South Dublin County Council has a vision to make the county the most cycle-friendly in Ireland, essentially. And that would be through providing people with a well-connected and well-thought-out safe cycling network to give people a genuine alternative to using a car. This has been pushed through their Cycle South Dublin initiative, which I believe is going to be in the County Development Plan 2022 to 2028. I think I'm right in saying that. Yeah. In 2016, the population of South Dublin County was, it says here, according to the 2016 census, 278,000, just over. And the council believes this is set to grow by a further 50,000 people, up to 329,000 by 2030. And according to those statistics as well, 57.3% of people in South Dublin County are reliant on motorised vehicles to get around, while 3.8% travel by bicycle, 15% by foot, 2.6% by train and Lewis, and 14% by bus. So basically the Cycle South Dublin programme includes 63 projects to deliver a further 260 kilometres of space for cycling and walking. Councillor Donaghy, I want to lead off with yourself on this. Some of the cycling infrastructure would leave you wanting at stages around the county at present, and I understand that's what this is all about. But with the traffic congestion growing by 11% in South Dublin since 2016 already, do you think that this development, by kind of condensing down the number of cars that are able to be on the road into these kind of choke points, do you think that this would actually convince people to hop on a bike instead?
I think I would challenge the premise of the question slightly. I mean, I represent Rathfarnham Temple Ogue. It's a mature area. There's not really a lot of opportunity to widen roads or change layouts very, very, very significantly. We're basically fitting as many cars on the road as we possibly can at the minute, and we're still facing congestion. And at this point, the only option that's available to us to do something about that congestion is to get people out of the massive car that only has one or two people in it, and see, can they make that journey through public transport, by walking or cycling, try and actually make better use of the road space that we already have. It's not a kind of zero-sum question of we're going to take this away from cars to punish drivers, because there are an awful lot of journeys that, no matter how much we in the county, for example, improve our walking and cycling infrastructure, or no matter how much Bus Connects makes a difference to people's movement patterns, there are some journeys that people aren't just going to be able to take unless they have a car. And I'd hope that this is a step towards minimizing the number of journeys that can only be done by private car, but we're never going to get away from them entirely. If somebody who's got mobility issues needs an appointment somewhere and they can't get there by public transport, I don't think anybody in any party is going to be arguing that they shouldn't be able to take the car. But it might mean that if more of us are walking, cycling, using public transport, it means they have an easier journey to get there. I mean, you mentioned some of the statistics about how people were traveling in the 2016 census, and I think there's newer information as part of the Cycle South Dublin consultation and reports. But one of the things that people don't talk that much about is the fact that 12% of households in South Dublin County don't have any motor vehicle whatsoever. And if you live in a community or an area or a part of the county where you need to get from point A to point B because that's where you work, or that's the only place you could get childcare, or that's where your physio appointment is, it's not always straightforward. And this is kind of about connecting dots for people. I also sit on the regional assembly, and we just had a presentation about the national investment framework for transport infrastructure. And one of the things I was really glad to see in there was that they're talking a lot more about connecting communities to each other, or connecting spots within communities to each other. Quite often when we look at transport, the question is always about commuters, and the answer is always roads, or the answer is always cars, or the answer is always you need a bus from point A to point B so people can get to work in the morning. But it doesn't take account of the 50% of journeys that are taken by primary carers, who are often women who might be going from, say, the creche to the shop, to the GP surgery, to visit a relative who needs care, back to the creche to do a pickup, to some other place in their community that isn't necessarily their workplace. And that hasn't really been accounted for in investment in transport up to this time. But by doing plans like Cycle South Dublin, you are creating those connections. You are putting the infrastructure in place so that if somebody wants to take the kids to the park, they can all do it on a bike. There is a place that is safe where they can store the bike, and they can then go back to wherever they're the next point in their journey. You're giving people more options. And I think that can only be a good thing, especially since we can't just assume that every household needs to rely on a car for every journey. You have to put that infrastructure in place so that people can make a decision. And if they choose to use a car, that's fine. But they need to have other options, or we're just going to be gridlocked in every single part of the county.
So would you I accept challenging the question as well. So do you see a vision where most people in South Dublin would travel by foot or by bike, whether it's to work or for extracurricular stuff?
I think it depends. Sorry. For instance, I was working in the city centre before the pandemic. I would have got the train into work. I was fortunate to be in a position where the infrastructure made sense. But I would have tried to get a lift up there because I didn't want to leave my bike because I didn't want it to get stolen. If we're doing things through the Cycle South Dublin program, like we're having safe cycle lockers, I can do that journey by bike instead of hoping someone is going to be able to give me a lift or driving up myself. Those are the kind of decisions that we want to allow people to make. I think everybody should have the option if they are in an area where the infrastructure makes sense. I think one of the good things about Cycle South Dublin is it's not purely about putting in bits of cycle trail in random bits of roads. It's really about joining things up that are already in place, making things a bit safer. And one thing that the county has really put a focus on is trying to get, for instance, kids to commute to school by by foot or by bike. We have the School Streets program, which is coming on stream, hopefully in September. In my own area, it's going to be in Bishop Shanahan School and Bishop Galvin School in Temple Ogue, and that should be a really positive development. I mean, it's been a huge success in Fingal, and it's been a huge success in Dublin City Council. But again, it's about giving people options. It's not about it's not a kind of war on cars, as I've seen it kind of characterized sometimes. It's allowing people to do things within their own communities, and I think one of the things we've seen during the pandemic is with people being in their own areas, they are actually forming connections in their community that they didn't necessarily do before. We have a parent working from home who's able to actually go down to the school gates rather than it being a childminder or rather than it being a grandparent. They're able to actually do that. And I think by getting people out of cars, you can make those connections a lot more easily. But I'm going a bit off topic there. That's not really part of the plan, to be fair.
Okay, I'll circle back around to a few other points in a minute. I just want to get the other two's councillors' opinions first. Councillor Richardson, when you consider those statistics, I suppose, I know as Councillor Donaghy highlighted there, they're probably a little bit, there's more updated ones, but I'd say they're still quite similar. When you consider that 57.3% of people are reliant on using motorised vehicles, would you see something like the Cycle South Dublin initiative, the plan, being sustainable?
I would. I think we need a bike hire as well, like Dublin City have introduced as well. I think that's the only way forward. I mean, people said when it started in Dublin City, it won't work. They'll be rather patrolling the Liffey and all that type of stuff. But you can see how successful it is. And I think if we had that across the South Dublin County area, I could see this really working. I think it's a great initiative to have it. But if we look at the schools, as Laura has pointed out, it's gridlock now at the moment outside every school in South Dublin, especially the weather. I can hear the rain bouncing off the roof here. So all kids are jumping in cars and getting lifts home today. The weather permitting, will work even more. We have walk on Wednesdays in most schools. And you go to local schools down the road in Killinarden here in Sacred Heart. The cars outside now, chock-a-blocked. All right, it's a rainy day, but if it was sunny, we could have bikes all over the place, cycling to the square and stuff like that and dropping them off and then walking back and stuff like that. But it's the only way it'll work is across the county. The hired bikes and all that has worked really well across Dublin City Council. And I do think the initiative across this county would be great. You're saying a rise of 50,000 people in the next to 2030. I can see it even going higher than that, especially with David's views as well on the child benefit thing as well. But I do think, look, we see in different things as the World Cup, there was lots more children born in that year and stuff like that when Ireland qualify and stuff like that. Different events cause different a child boom, a baby boom, and that type of stuff. But I do think the initiative from South Dublin going forward for this bike scheme is great. And you take on Nora's points and all that type of stuff. There is some roads where you can cycle on because it's not wide enough and all that across different areas and all that. The Blessing Road coming out, say from the Selby back. It's a very dangerous road coming back. The road's not wide enough and stuff like that. So if people did want it, they'd have to go an alternative route and that. And that's not criticism now. It's a positive thing. So let's keep it positive, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Councillor McManus, this was a question that was actually put to people through the public consultation last year, and I'm eager to see what you think. The question was just, what will it take to leave our cars behind in favour of using walking, cycling or public transport?
Two bits of feedback I've got since getting on the South Dublin County Council just about transport. I get phone calls from people who want to drive their car everywhere. And they're saying to me now that the Greens have taken over. And you're trying to stop me driving my car and you're changing the roundabout and doing this, that and everything. And I just say to them, look, we sort of designed our cities poorly in the last 80, 90 years, all around cars. And we have congestion and gridlock. The other bit of feedback I get is from cyclists saying that the cycle lanes we have aren't good enough. We do far too much for people who want to drive and you're doing nothing for us as cyclists. So that's the two bits of feedback I'm getting from the community when they ring me. And I see it on Facebook and social media. Probably the most effective way to stop people driving their cars into the centre of town is if we followed other European cities that have a congestion charge. And to say we're going to charge you €2 or €3 if you want to drive your car into the centre of town. I get the bus. If I'm working in the city centre, I get the 16 bus on Grange Road in Rathfarnham. Due to a lack of bus lanes and congestion and everything else, I'm stuck on the bus with a lot of other people trying to get to work in the morning. behind Mercedes and Range Rovers and all sorts of different types of cars, and everyone else trying to drive their car into the centre of town. In Dublin city centre, they have increased the price of parking on the street, and Owen Keegan, the city manager, has reduced the number of spaces purely as a means to try and discourage people to drive their car into the city centre. That's something that could be looked at, probably be very unpopular. I don't think you'd have cross-party support for that kind of measure. So I suppose we're making gradual moves. I think the cycle lanes that were put in probably 20 years ago, they were the standard cycle lane. The feedback I've got from a lot of cycling groups, they want segregated cycle lanes where you raise it up off the ground about an inch or so. And by narrowing the space for cars, you actually encourage people to slow down. So God forbid, if there was an accident, they're traveling at a slower speed. So there'll be less of a chance of a serious incident. But look, we're trying to gently encourage people to take up more walking, cycling. We could discuss the parking differences in terms of views in our villages across South Dublin County Council. We are the only council in Dublin that will have 30 minutes free parking, which I supported. And I'm pretty sure we'll have the cheapest parking as well. So I think a lot of the moves we're making now in the last couple of years is positive to try and make our villages more attractive for people to come and spend more time there, and probably spend more money there as well, while also trying to allow people who just want to nip into the shops, nip into the post office, back out, go somewhere else, and try and support local traders who are concerned that if they lost their 30 minutes parking, people wouldn't be going to the villages, they'd be going to the big shopping centres where there's loads of free parking, you can park there for 2 or 3 hours and wander around. So you're trying to find that sort of balance to try and keep everyone on board.
Councillor Donaghy, just to bring yourself back in on that point in particular with the free 30 minutes parking in the villages, would you be for pedestrianising villages and stuff like that? Because obviously they're quite contained spaces anyway. And would you consider the fact that maybe the 30 minutes free parking would be more of an incentive to drive to the village rather than to get a bike or walk?
I think there's a couple of different types of users who the parking serves. And I didn't vote against the motion to have 30 minutes free parking because I don't think any of the alternatives that are currently available serve people who, for instance, do have mobility issues or older people. I think we do need better schemes. If we were talking about changing that parking just to be disabled parking, for example, I would have absolutely no problem doing that. I think what I do have more of an issue with is where you already have a congested village, and that puts people off sometimes going in on foot or cycling in, or it's not a pleasant place because you have a massive thoroughfare going right through the middle of an old village, and it doesn't encourage people to hang around. I don't know that having lots of parking available there helps to make it more livable and helps to make it feel more cohesive. I know, for instance, Rathfarnham and Temple Ogue are both getting parklets, which are going to be little areas which have seating. There's a bit of shrubbery planted. People can sit and socialize outdoors, and if they've got their takeaway coffee, or I'm sure probably takeaway bag of chips and everything else as well, that's a communal space that's within the village, and it does encourage people to hang around. I feel that does more to create a community atmosphere than creating a car park in the middle of a village. And I'm not being fair to the argument that's being made by others, because I know that that's not their intention either, but I'm not sure that incentivizing people to take their cars in is quite the same as providing a car parking space for somebody who needs it and couldn't go otherwise. So I'm not sure how you get the balance right with that. I also supported a motion to keep parking free in places like Rathcoole and Saggart and Newcastle, where there isn't necessarily any alternative. If you live on the edge of those villages, you can't necessarily walk or cycle in safely. And if you need to pop into the corner shop to pick up your milk, there's not really any way to do it other than by car. And I have sympathy for anybody who's in a position where mobility is an issue and they maybe don't have access to a car. And putting a parklet into those parking spaces wouldn't help them either. It's proper public transport would help them. So I had very mixed feelings about treating free parking as though it was going to be the panacea for villages that are struggling and traders in villages that are concerned about footfall, because there's plenty of evidence. There's evidence from Henry Street and Grafton Street most recently, where they actually looked at how many people visited those streets by car and how many people came into the city, for example, to do their shopping, and they did it by car, by bus, on foot, by active transport, and traders consistently significantly underreported how many people came into the city on by bike or on foot or on public transport. They assumed that absolutely everybody was coming by car. Absolutely not the case. A minority come in by car because it's a nightmare to park. Because it's not the most efficient way to get to the part of the city that they're looking to get to. You know, I think the key to making a city livable is to make it livable at a human scale, not at a car scale. And I think we've still got a good way to go on that. And I don't think free parking is really the answer there. I think it's encouraging people to be there on foot and making it easy for them to be there on foot.
Councillor Richardson, I just want to ask you another question. I know obviously the Cycle South Dublin thing is very positive, and it's definitely a step in the right direction in terms of providing safe spaces for people to be able to cycle and walk. But when you're trying to encourage people to walk and cycle, is putting like things like bollards and kissing gates in place. Like I know there's, I don't know if you've seen it, I'm sure you have, it went viral, the picture of the bollards in Stockin Lane, basically just placed all over the place. It was crazy looking. Do you think that that's like, it kind of conflicts with Cycle South Dublin, being like putting all those kind of bollards and kissing gates in place conflicts with the initiative of Cycle South Dublin?
Some areas need them and some areas don't. I mean, it's as simple as that, you know what I mean? And certain areas need the kissing gates and stuff like that, probably because of antisocial behaviour and different things like that. And bollards, I didn't see that in Stockin Lane, but if they're there, obviously someone has requested them to be there as well. So they're there for a reason. I'd have to see them to make a comment on that one. But I've seen different areas now looking for bollards in different estates around Tallaght South area, in different new parts of the area, and they're looking for cul-de-sacs to be put in. But I mean, you know, the bike scheme is great, and what Laura says there about parking, you know, we need the village not to be closed off to pedestrian. Absolutely. If you look at Television or Farnham Village and say Clondalkin, Rackcool, banks are in the main street in the villages. So outside the town centre are the banks. And although I do my banking online, probably a lot of people, but the older people don't do the banking online and stuff like that. They want to be able to go to the bank and their local chemist and the village feel and all that type of stuff. So I don't think pedestrianising stuff like that would work. Look, the free parking, you know, if you go to the square, you're getting 2 hours free parking as long as you're shopping, as well as that. But if you're going to the villages, you need free parking as well. You need an initiative to give them something to get into the village. And the mobility as well is a big thing as well. We have an aging population in South Dublin as well. So we need to be looking after those as well, you know. So, I mean, as you say in the bollards, if we're seeing that, I can make a comment on it, the ones in Stockin Lane. I haven't ventured up there in the last 2 months or so, you know.
Right. If you do get a chance to see it, it's a bit of crack.
Send it on to me. I'll have a look at it. Yeah,
I will actually.
Yeah,
I have it in the paper here behind me, but it'll take me a minute to get it out.
Yeah,
you just had that lying around, Hayden.
I did. Yeah, just sitting here behind me. Just so happens to be here somewhere. Hang on, give us a sec. I'm not going to find it quick enough.
Can I just say on that? It's not strictly speaking in the Rathfarnham Templeogue area, but I think it's in the Fir House
ever. Sorry,
Brina area. It did come up at an area meeting, and I'm not an engineer, traffic engineer, to know exactly what they were trying to do with the council, but the engineer who was there on behalf of council management, he explained that it's coming down a hill and you have cars coming down, then there's a cycle lane, then there's a turn into an estate, you have pedestrians, and he said that they had done an audit or an assessment, and they had to put something in there to try and stop this point where everyone comes together and meets. You have cars coming down the hill, you have cyclists coming down, you have pedestrians, there's a walkway there for pedestrians to go across that road. And he said they had to put something in there, and he sort of acknowledged that it's a very tricky one to resolve, and perhaps there's too many bollards there, but they had to put in some bollards to try and protect pedestrians from cyclists who are coming down the hill, protect cyclists from cars out on the road, to try and keep everyone safe.
Yeah, no,
I probably didn't explain that well now, but that's what the engineer was trying to explain, what he was trying to achieve.
Thanks for doing that, and I do appreciate the reason it is there. I do, and it's just, I suppose when the pictures went up online, it was just people were just in awe of it was like an obstacle course, I suppose, is the way it was described. But like I suppose,
it does look very silly. Like, in fairness, it does look silly, but having spoken to the engineers, I mean, there was a good intention behind it, and it was to not put in something like a kissing gate, which is going to be seriously problematic for people just from an accessibility point of view. I mean, if you've ever tried to get through a kissing gate with a cargo bike or with a bike that has a child on the back of it, they are an absolute disaster. And that's what I get phone calls from people about. They're angry about having to use kissing gates in areas that maybe have a huge gap next to the gate. So if somebody wants to come in and, use a scrambler or a quad in a park, they can just drive straight through. But
so then what's the point of having the kissing gate?
What's the point of having the kissing gate? So
yeah, of course. Okay. Look, I think we'll leave it there. I'm very conscious of the time now, so I'm very appreciative for all the points that were raised today, and I think we had a good conversation. I hope you all felt you all had enough time to speak and that it was fair. So I just had to say, Green Party Councillor Laura Donaghy, thanks very much for your time. Fine Gael Councillor David McManus and Sinn Féin Councillor Dermot Richardson. It's been a pleasure to have you all on Local Voices this week.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Thank you for tuning into Local Voices. If you haven't already, be sure to follow the Echo newspaper on your streaming platform of choice or subscribe to the Echo newspaper on YouTube to never miss a minute.